Hello and welcome. We are so happy to see you all here again today. We are happy to make your acquaintance once again. We are happy to be in your company. We are happy to be bathed in your wisdom. We are excited to see where the exchange of information goes today. And we would love to know who has the first question or comment today.
I could start. Sorry. So my question is like this idea that pain is inevitable but suffering is optional. I want to know if that's true. And if so, like how can we achieve that? Not suffering.
Yes, yes. So the crux of that statement is really saying that there are myriad, infinite ways of interpreting a particular situation. Yes. And so the suffering comes in what we make that situation mean. Yes. And so if something happens that is upsetting or something happens that is even physically painful, it is in the nature of the human way of understanding the world to start telling a story about it, to start creating meaning. Yes. So, oh, I hurt myself. I won't be able to go to work next week, or I won't be able to, have brunch with my friends, or I won't be able to do the thing I wanted to do. My life will change and there will be suffering. Or, oh, that person was cruel to me. That must mean something about myself. Yes. So we start assigning meaning to these events that happen. But the truth of the matter is, we don't know what the meaning will be. That is only our supposition. Yes, it is based on the best information we have at the moment. It is based on our past experience of that type of situation. It is based on our self-concept, what we think of ourselves. And so we would invite you to try an experiment. What if nothing meant anything? For here's the great paradox of existence is, yes, you are here living a human life that has an arc. Yes, it has a beginning and a middle and an end, and there is a story and there are lessons along the way. Yes, just like many of the stories and the fables that we tell each other. Yes, whether that is an old story that is passed down or whether this is a film or a book. Yes, we're telling stories. And these stories are true. And they are just temporary experiences. Yes, you are temporarily having this human experience, as we have spoken of before. And so we would ask you, if you go see a movie and the character struggles with something painful happening, and at the end you walk out of the movie and you go back to your life, what is the meaning of that movie? Does it have any actual impact on real life? It is just a story. It ended when the lights came up at the end of the movie, yes. And so this story simultaneously has meaning, it has importance, and it also means nothing. It doesn't actually affect, quote unquote, the real world. Yes. And so we would say, as a way to experiment with the idea of alleviating the suffering, what if this didn't mean anything? It is a form of non-attachment. Yes. What if this didn't mean anything about me? What if this didn't mean anything about my circumstances? What if this didn't mean anything about my day-to-day life? What if this was just an event that happened and it has no effect on anything whatsoever? Or it has a positive effect on something that I cannot yet see? Yes. So we would say that is one way to look at it, is to play with the idea of meaninglessness. The other thing to play with is the idea of suffering as a gateway to compassion. Yes. So one of the things that suffering does is to help us learn about suffering. Yes. And in learning about suffering, we are then able to open our heart in a way to other people, to ourselves, that we may not have been able to before. And if the goal of any human life is to remember that place we come from, where there are no delineations, no separations, where it is all acceptance, love, equanimity, one of the main roads to get there, or the paths to get there in this human life, is through developing compassion, is through erasing those boundaries between people. And a big way to erase boundaries between people is to have understanding, to have compassion. And so another way to think of something when something bad happens or something unpleasant happens is, how is this helping my soul? There is not a good word. We will say evolve/remember to who I really am. And so we think playing with those two ideas. One, what if this didn't mean anything? What if this story that I'm telling myself was actually not true? Yes. What if my desire for a different outcome, or a desire to feel differently, is all just a story in my head? What if? And then secondly, looking at, as they say, suffering as the road to grace. Yes, suffering as the road to awakening, because suffering helps you understand compassion, and compassion helps you understand or remember your true nature as an uninterrupted being, as one consciousness. Yes? Is that helpful?
Yes.
Good, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question or a comment or a thought or an idea or a good joke?
I hit unmute before you said the joke. I was the queen of jokes when I was a kid, all the time. I don't have one right now, though. And this was just a thought that popped up. So suffering, opens the door to compassion. And is that the only way to cultivate compassion? Does suffering have to be part of the equation? Is it possible to be truly compassionate without having suffered?
Yes, it is possible.
Okay.
It is possible. And this is often what we speak of in terms of karma. Yes, when you come back the second time, the 100th time, the 10,000th time, you don't necessarily need to learn the lessons in such a dramatic way as you do the first time that you're looking at an issue. And so it is possible to come back as what one would call an enlightened being, or pretty close to it, so that you don't have to have much practice before you get there. And in that way, you already are born with this compassion, with this ability for unlimited compassion. Yes, unlimited love. So no, not necessarily. But every time you start to look at an issue from a different point of view, or the metaphor we have used before is you are pursuing a different course of study at the university. Yes, it could even be in the same department. You will have to start learning that compassion in a new way. Yes. And so it is not necessary, no. And in fact, we will have all levels and all spectrums of experience with this. Yes. But it is one way. It is one way to help you remember who you really are. This is a good question. But you can always ask to speak with your guides, for they are always there with you. And you can always say, I don't like this way. Can you please present the lesson to me in a different way? Yes, because while you are here having agreed to learn certain lessons or study a certain subject, you can always decide that a certain teacher isn't one you like and transfer to a different class.
I love that. When I heard that sometime in the recent past, I just thought it was set, right? And for you to say, no, you can speak up, or I actually don't want that gift, thank you, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting that it's a conversation rather than this is just how it is. So yeah,
yes,
that's cool. Yeah.
Yes. And you can say, for example, once you start to see, and this is why introspection is important, is because you need to see the pattern first. What am I studying here? Yes. What is the point of me being here? But then once you have ascertained that, you can say something like, I would like to stop learning these lessons through physical illness. Can we try a different way? Yes. And then there will be a different lesson. It may be easier, it may be harder, but at least it will give you some change on what you are looking at. Or a different way of looking at the problem. Yes, sometimes it is helpful to approach a problem from a different perspective, and it helps us see, what is it I'm really trying to solve here?
Yeah.
I have one comment about the suffering and pain, I think was the word Georgina used. And I don't know if Georgina, you meant emotional or physical or both, but I found for myself that the most effective way for me was to accept it as it is and to feel whatever I'm feeling in relation to it being there. And but the only way that I could accept it was to attempt to send it love, to love it. And that showed me quickly what I was resisting or what I was hating. And that which I was hating persisted, that phrase. But acceptance has been the most important thing for me. And again, to see it through my ability to love it.
Yes, very wise, very wise. There is great freedom in the ability to look at not only the pain, but the story that our mind is making about the pain, yes, which is the suffering, the desire for it to be different. And send it acceptance, send it love. Here you are. Hello. Thank you for coming in. I don't know why you're here. You're not particularly the most amicable house guest, but welcome. Yes. Yes. Very wise. And we love the idea of the spotlight being shined on what it is by sending it love. Yes, that is very helpful. Because sometimes it is hard to know, what is it exactly that is the story we're creating? What is it exactly that we're resisting? And if you try to send something love, that somewhere in your mind you feel like it is wrong or shameful or etc., the voice will quickly pop up to say, oh no, that is not deserving of love. And then you will know pretty quickly, there you are, shadow. Hello. I see you more clearly now. Thank you for showing yourself. Because now we can work together. Does anyone else have a question or a comment?
Hi there, I'm Jessica. I just wanted to say that I can appreciate your explanation of sort of the spiritual aspect of the rationale as to what's going on with pain and suffering. Only because I currently work in a hospital and I work specifically with stroke patients. And a lot of the times the stroke patients go from like fully functional to all of a sudden one day, like half of their body's not working anymore, or sometimes it's their whole body. And a lot of times they ask me, like, why is this happening? And of course, we go to the medical, rationale of, it was because you weren't eating well, or you weren't taking care of your sugars. But it feels like a very much like blame, shame type of rationale. So, and I feel like a lot of times they're asking me more of like the spiritual aspect versus just, why specifically did this happen in my body,
Yes.
So I can appreciate being able to, I guess, share that information of it's more of an opportunity. I don't know how or when to share that, but I like that rationale better than just saying, bad, you didn't take care of this, and that.
Yes. For we know that from our own personal experiences, and we all have great compassion for this, that being shamed or blamed is not a way to make changes. Yes, it is only a way to invite more shame and blame, or internal shame and blame. And so we love this idea of transforming that question into one of what is this helping you see that you couldn't see before? How is this helping you understand your humanity and common humanity in a way that you couldn't before? Yes. We would also invite you to watch interviews with Ram Dass, who also had a stroke, and who talked at great length about the stroke being the only thing that would have gotten him to the next level of introspection, that you wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. And so this idea of a little bit of not necessarily automatically assigning blame that this is a terrible thing that has happened, even though that might be the common narrative. Ill health is terrible. Yes, pain and suffering is terrible. But inviting in the opportunity that it is terrible, and at the same time is an opportunity for growth in a way that you would never have experienced before. It can be both at the same time. It can be both at the same time, but we think that being able to maintain or contain both awarenesses in your psyche when you're going through something terrible is one of the keys to alleviating suffering. Yes, I am suffering. And this is also an opportunity for a growth of compassion, a growth of understanding, a growth of introspection. So yes, very good observation.
Awesome, thank you. And how do you spell Ram Dass?
RAM space DASS.
DASS. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that leads me to a question. So, yes, we know from experience that, I never learn anything when I feel I'm being shamed. And when you're in relationship with a child, and any other human being, or particularly a child, and and they view any correction, any accountability, anything that's not to their liking as shaming them, what is there to be done? Is there anything to be done? Is there any way in?
So really you are asking, in this case, how to undo past experiences of being shamed. Yes, there's a big cauldron of shame that it feels like everything is just being added to. We think that the antidote to that, so the antidote to shame in the most simplistic sense, the antidote to shame is a feeling of worthiness regardless, right? So worthiness completely independent of anything you have done, said, thought, any qualities about yourself that you consider immutable. Yes, just worthiness, just deserving of unconditional love and regard. Yes. And so what are some ways that you can foster the embers of that feeling in your child? For you cannot make anyone feel a certain way, as we know, but you can certainly hold space for a person in a way that allows them to feel a certain way. So you can easily hold space for someone in a way that shames them. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? That was bad that you did. Yes, that is holding space for them in a way that fosters the embers of shame. But you can also equally hold space for someone in a way that fosters the embers of worthiness. And we do this by modeling, by practicing, by being love and acceptance. Yes. So we are thinking of perhaps a child coming to their parent and saying, I am gay or transgender, et cetera, et cetera. And the parent may, while at the same time, have their own emotions of, oh, this is going to make life harder for you. And oh, this makes me sad because I had my own visions of you having a life or a family or, my own grandchildren in a certain way that are now different. Yes. You can also at the same time hold the space for them of how beautiful that you are that way. I am so thankful and proud that you were able to find your way to that truth about yourself. And then you open your arms and give them, a big welcoming hug. And so what are some ways that you could engender those embers of feeling worthy, of feeling loved? And it is not by loving on someone. It is by creating space for them to grow that in themselves. It is not doing for, it is doing with. Because what we are really asking someone to do in that case is change their own narrative about themselves and about the world. And that only happens through wisdom. And wisdom we are thinking now of what Jennifer said about if you were born that way. Wisdom most often happens through experience, whether in this life or past lives. But most, whatever we are here presented and learning, yes, it is here for us in this life. And so how do I cultivate that ability to experience what they need to experience and gain that wisdom in themselves? Yes. When you are planting a field, you cannot make the corn grow. That is not your job. Your job is only to make sure that the field is a welcoming and loving place for corn. And it is the same thing with self-love and worthiness and all of those things. You can certainly help someone else feel that they are in a safe and loving field, but you cannot make them grow. But the rule or law of nature is that when we do remember who we truly are, yes, when we do reconnect to that feeling of universal consciousness, source, God, whatever name you want to give to it, we will naturally start to feel more accepted and more worthy. We will naturally grow in that direction, just as a plant grows towards the light. Yes. So what are some ways that you can help your son understand that he is worthy and loved just as he is, without directly telling him that? Yes, with the showing, not telling. Yes, as they say in acting. What are some ways you can show him that? What are some ways you can do with, not necessarily do for?
That's a good question, in part because he doesn't want to do anything with me, because, he wants to spend the time with his friends.
These can be very small moments. Think of a time when you were maybe having a meal with a friend, and there was a moment of warmth and connection there that you felt, I'm so happy to be here right now.
Well, it's certainly, it's one of the reasons I like driving to and from school. Is that is a, he's on his phone, he's texting, but it is a time when I can, that we're in a contained space and I can beam my love at him. And no matter what has sort of happened that morning, whether he was extremely difficult to get out of bed, extremely slow moving, we're late, he didn't, whatever happened the night before with him refusing to go to bed or whatever, I can consciously choose to beam my love at him and to let all of that stuff go.
Can you let him in on this secret as well? Can you consecrate that time as sacred space and say, the time when I am driving you to and from school, I would like us to try to make space for one another. We would say practice the art of listening, but we feel like that might have negative connotations for him. So maybe think of a different way to phrase it. And perhaps it can even turn into, as happens with many consecrated times, consecrated spaces, is we perform rituals. And the reason we perform rituals, the reason we ask the same questions every time or do the same actions every time, is because it is a way of reflection. It is a strategy for reflection. Yes. And so perhaps you could have that time be one where there is one question that you both answer. Yes. And so the question could be something like, What makes you feel loved? What makes you feel energized and alive? What helps you when you're sad? Yes, you see where I'm getting at?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so make this time in the car your church.
Yep.
Bring him in on it. Because if you are doing something and he is doing something unaware of what you are doing, it is much harder for you to start vibrating in that same way.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I think the most difficult thing for me is when he does something like, so for example, yesterday he had committed to going to this youth group. It's my idea. It's a requirement that I've made in terms of his being home, that he'd be involved in some kind of youth group. And we got, I was amazed that he actually got dressed and was ready to go. And, but then as we got there, more and more things started bothering him, that we couldn't find the entrance, and anyway, the long story short is we finally found the entrance. I got out of the car. He apparently said, "Don't get out yet," because he wasn't emotionally ready to do it. But I didn't hear that. I got out of the car and then he bolted and walked left. So I was pissed. I was disappointed. And there's a consequence for him making that choice, that there's a software program that he loses the privilege of. So he actually got a friend to get him an Uber to come home. And so then I had to abort my plans to go shopping. So then when I came home, he was clear I was not happy. And that is the most difficult time for me, like when I want to, like, I cleaned it up pretty quickly. We actually, he went up to his room, talked to his friends, and I started to work. And so then I could shift my energy. But that is the most difficult time for me, after he has done something, broken a promise, or dug his heels in about something. And I'm humanly angry and upset.
And so we think that the important thing for you to remember for yourself and to communicate with him is that when someone is angry, for we feel you have experienced this as well, that does not mean that you are unsafe. Because when you have been in the presence of someone who externalizes their anger, yes, who is unwilling to do the shadow work, and so all of the anger explodes out onto everyone else. Yes, they bleed out onto everyone else, as people say of the trauma injury. That is dangerous. But if we can have our anger with each other in the full awareness that you are still worthy, you are still safe, then anger becomes something that, like any other emotion, we can talk through. Yes. And like any other time, it might be good if there is a exhaustion component of some type or another to take a break. Yes, regroup. Like you said, get your head back in a space where you are more centered. He is more centered. But maybe that can be one of the questions for your car ride. What is a way for us to be angry at each other and still have it feel safe? That's a difficult one. Because for both of you, you have had past experiences where at the end of someone being angry, it did not feel safe. Many of us have had that experience. What would it feel like for someone to be angry at me? And at the same time, I am fully confident, aware, feel secure in the fact that this is just an emotion. We are working through an emotion that is arising and it will fall. And I am safe all the way through this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was angry with me because I got out of the car before he was emotionally ready to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was angry with him because he bolted.
Yes.
He spewed at me a little bit. And I guess I was left with, and this goes back to the core of my question. I was left with like, I don't know how to respond to his anger in a way that is not shaming. Not that I would be intentionally shaming,
Yes.
but given his lens,
Yes.
I don't know how to respond to his anger. I basically just listened and didn't respond because I was afraid that anything that came out of my mouth, even if it was logical, you know, even if it was reasonable, like, I mean, and it's funny because sometimes we do a lot of our processing via text because he, you know, is texting me saying, you made it weird because you were following those girls. Well, I was looking for where they were going in, you know, and basically my conclusion is you didn't want to go. Ultimately, it was scary. You would have, like, the wind blowing would have been enough of an excuse.
Yes.
Not to go.
Yes. And so this is also something to be aware of is often as people that either have had many past lives of wisdom or have just lived many years on this earth and has wisdom, we can often see other people's shadows in ways that they can't see themselves. And this is always true. It is hard to see our own shadow. Yes, other people can always see it so much more clearly than we can. And so what do you do when you're in a situation where you can see the underpinnings? You can see the stuff in the shadows that is directing the actions and the emotions, but they cannot. And we will say that is exactly the right time to help someone see that through your eyes, they are worthy. There's nothing wrong with them. This is normal. This is a reaction to shadow. Good. We need to react to shadow in order to bring shadow to the surface so that we can look at it. Yes. And so we think that your strategy that you used was very good in that time. If someone is upset, if someone is angry, the best thing we can do is help them feel safe and worthy. Because then, only then, when they feel safe and worthy, will they feel safe enough to look at what's underneath, the thing that you can see so clearly.
Well, and this is my work because, you know, my pattern of thinking I'm making him feel safe and worthy is to do something for him. So I'm back to that again. And I didn't. I actually implemented the consequence, which is he doesn't have access to the software until he goes to the meeting. But I did it, you know, I just did it without anger. And then he said, I know we're at the hour, but then he wanted food that we didn't have in the house, which my plan when he went to the group meeting was to go shopping. And so I said, sorry, I was going to go shopping while you were at the meeting. He said, well, can we go out now? And I said, no, sorry. Choices have consequences, sweetie. I'm sorry.
Yes.
So even though we didn't do any direct processing, I hope that, and I did not take, I bolted out of the car trying to get, so that he couldn't back out.
Yes. And then God laughed at your plans.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if I had stayed in the car and said, okay, are you ready? I mean, he might still have bolted. So
He might still have bolted.
yeah.
Yes. Or you might have had a different conversation and you might have turned around and gone home. Yes. Not holding your boundary. There is a invaluable measure or consequence to being someone who is able to see someone without the shame, the blame, the drama, the criticism that they put on themselves. There is an invaluable asset to being someone who says, why are you beating yourself up about that? It's fine. You're figuring it out. Of course you are. I love you. Yes, to being the voice of acceptance and worthiness.
Oh, it's so hard as a parent to hold, to do that and hold these expectations of, you got to get this done.
Yes.
No, you can't fail this class. If you want this trip, you can't fail this class. If you get suspended, there's no trip. So it's, and again, I can do that and hold the expectation, and then I have no control over his lens.
Yes.
That he's seeing this consequence as shame,
Yes.
shame.
Yes. Perhaps you could even go a step further in your own mind as you are doing through this. It will help shift your anger and your frustration. I am so excited that he has this opportunity to work through this while I'm here with him, rather than on his own somewhere with who knows who. Someone that will not love him as fiercely as a mother does, because there is no other type of love like that. Yes. I'm so excited that we are able to work through this shadow stuff while he is here with me. Obviously, you cannot say that to him out loud. He is not in the place where he would understand that. But you can say it to yourself. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to work through this with him while he is still here with me. And that may help shift your energy about the situation a little bit. Yes.
That's a good one. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. But yes, we understand that it is, as we like to say, advanced study to choose to have children. Yes. Nothing else quite brings up your own parts of yourself you don't want to look at, your own shadow stuff, as having a little person in front of you who's holding a mirror right up to your eyes.
Yep.
Well, thank you everyone for such a good conversation today, for your questions, for your comments. We appreciate, as usual, all of your inquiry. We appreciate your openness and your willingness to be here with us, to teach us as much as we teach you, for that is why we are here. We are all students, we are all teachers, we are all experts, we are all beginners, all at the same time. And so we thank you for your openness. We thank you for your openness. And we look forward to speaking with you again next week. Thank you all for coming today.